Welcome to Paranormal UK Radio with your hosts, Irene and Mark and Mark Johnson.
Welcome everyone to Paranormal UK Radio, broadcasting to you on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I am your host, Irene Allen Block, and with me tonight is my co-host, as usual, Mark Johnson.
Now, you know what you need to do sometimes? You're going to have to say that with more feeling and passion, like, welcome to the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Oh, shut up, I'll kill you. Okay, then, let's go again.
No, that's fine. I'm just...
Paranormal UK Radio Network.
There we go. Yeah, no. That's actually... I'm leaving this part in, so deal with it.
Up yours.
So... See,
right. So, where do we go from here?
Where do we go from there?
I know, Mark. What I want to talk about.
Okay, what do you want to talk about?
We got another good show coming next week. People, direct from Italy. We're broadcasting from Italy. We've got an Italian show for any Italian-speaking people and non-Italian-speaking people.
Well, it's going to be a very unique show. In fact, I'll be honest, we were a little worried about it before we started recording it because our guest does not speak English. But we had a translator there, and surprisingly, the show went so well and flowed so smoothly that we really highly recommend everybody tune in. Don't get put off by the fact that our guest doesn't speak English because it's
we've got no subtitles going underneath.
Exactly. But, it's between the translator. We kept the questions short. Everything flows. It's a really interesting show. And it really opens up to here in America and the UK for people to hear how people in other countries in Europe are doing paranormal research. And there's some fascinating stuff behind this. So it's definitely a show that you do not want to miss.
No, people, you do not want to miss it at all. It's going to be an absolutely fantastic show. Mm-hmm. And I guess that week will be Carmelo Paparoni.
Paparoni. Not pepperoni. Paparoni.
Paparoni.
Which was all the more... Doing an Italian show was all the more depressing for me since I'm not going to be able to go to Italy. So you and your husband better go out and enjoy yourself and take lots of pictures for me.
I will do. Don't worry, I will do.
Drink lots of Peronis.
Enjoy myself.
Drink lots and lots of... Yes, for lots of Peronis, just for me.
Peronis, Proseccos, whatever. Yeah, I'll be there. Okay, then. So, where do we go now?
Let's get right into our show. We'll introduce our guest. We're excited to have this gentleman on with us. It's first and really interested in talking about Bigfoot. And our guest is Farlan. Yes, our guest is Farlan Huff, who is a Bigfoot researcher out of Oklahoma. Farlan, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Hello, Farlan.
Hi.
I told you I messed up, don't I?
I noticed a thing.
Ah, you didn't notice? You didn't notice a little... Okay, great. I must have done well.
I thought it was scripted.
and as we told Farlan before we came on the show, because he's in Oklahoma, and I had to.
Here we go, another rub-in.
Here he is. I'm half Okie and half Hoopy, so I can.
Okie Hoopy.
So we got the Oklahoma thing going there.
Absolutely, I'm a hillbilly anywhere I go. That's just what happens.
Okay, and for the British audience, Oklahoma and West Virginia.
Oklahoma.
Okie Hoopy.
Oklahoma's the Okie, and West Virginia are Hoopies.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Okie
of course,
Hoopies.
right away I start slipping into that, hillbilly accent.
I'll shoot you.
You've threatened to kill me twice now tonight.
Have I really?
Not very nice of you, yes. Okay, now let's get into the program. Farlan, for our listeners who may not be familiar with you, could you tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into researching Bigfoot? And I promise that'll be the only lame question of the night.
Oh, well, no problem. Well, what actually happened is my grown son was visiting me up in Illinois. I used to live up there for a time. And we were cooking Thanksgiving dinner. I'm in the kitchen helping out, and he shouts from the living room, "Hey, Dad, they're in here talking about Bigfoot being in Oklahoma on the television. And he was watching a show called Bigfootville, and it was about people looking for Bigfoot in Oklahoma. I had never considered Bigfoot being real. I saw the Patterson Gimlin footage when I was a kid. I went to the movie theater and saw it back in 68 or 69, and that's as far as I got with the Bigfoot. I had no idea that people were actually talking about it. And so as I watched this program, I instantly thought of this hunting cabin on a ranch in the Arbuckle Mountains in Oklahoma. And I just thought, well, if Bigfoot's in Oklahoma, he could be at this ranch just as easily as anywhere else. And so I planned a trip a couple of years later, and I just wanted to, have an open mind, go out there and see. And I guess you could call it beginner's luck. On the first night at this cabin, I definitely got visited. And I knew nothing about the Bigfoot topic at all. I didn't know about the recordings of vocalizations. I didn't know anything about the samurai chatter or anything, but that's what I heard. And so later, when I started looking things up on the computer, everything was validated for me because I heard exactly what I would describe as samurai chatter. And I heard those loud wood knocks. And that was my first encounter where I realized what was going on. As I got into this further, I looked back on things when I was a kid and a teenager, and I realized I probably had some encounters back then, but as everyone does, you just shrug your shoulders because you don't know what's going on. But that's how I got into it.
Now, you mentioned...
Sorry, Mark.
Go ahead.
Farlan, just
Yes.
for the British audience that are not really, we don't get many Bigfoot running around here as far as we know. What's samurai chatter?
Okay, there's some recordings that Ron Moorhead captured back in the 70s, and
they're part of the Sierra Sounds recordings.
Yes, absolutely, the Sierra Sounds, and that's how they describe the vocalizations. It sounds like samurai, Japanese samurai soldiers talking in that deep voice. It's almost like over the top, like when John Belushi used to do the samurai on Saturday Night Live back in the day. It sounds very similar to that. And some people, when they listen, they hear, some people might listen to those recordings and hear a Japanese language. Some people might listen to that and hear a German language, and it just depends on who's listening sometimes. And Scott Nelson has analyzed those recordings, and he's really come up with some interesting discoveries on that. I think that there's really not anyone that can dispute Scott Nelson's findings, because who has the credentials to do that? Scott Nelson is a cryptolinguist, retired from the U.S. Navy, and his job was to decode intercepted messages. He's a language expert, and so he listened to these recordings and actually analyzed them in a computer program and broke them down to the point where he separated the words. He can't tell you what those words mean. He can only tell you that this is a word and this is a word, and they seem to connect as a sentence. And to me, that's fascinating. If people want to think that Bigfoot's only an ape, but they have this language, there's a lot that we still have to learn.
Yeah. It couldn't be that some people hear it like Japanese and some people hear, maybe I'm being a div here. Some people hear it like Japanese, some people hear it like German, because there's different dialects with Bigfoots.
Well,
various regions that they come from. Maybe they got, like we have over here, we got Yorkshire, we got the black, or whatever, and the London accent, Cockney accent. We got all sorts of accents. It couldn't be regional.
Well, I think it could be because, if you think about it, the Bigfoot were here first, and then the immigrants came, and so depending on who settled in this region, that the Bigfoot will overhear that dialect or that language for a long time. They've been watching us ever since we showed up. They've been watching the Native Americans. And so who's to say who was here first, the Native Americans or the Bigfoot? And I don't claim to have all of these answers. I like to think about the topic and try to go in every direction I can. And I just love to ponder these things.
Now, the Sierra sounds and that samurai chatter, there's a couple of different recordings from the Sierra sounds, but that one was the most intriguing when I first heard it. It sounds like human language, and it sounds like, you know, it's like, you know, like you said, Saturday Night Live, like a John Belushi trying to fake it, because it's not exactly, you know, Japanese. It's just the inflection and the way it's obviously very human sounding speech. Now, there's another aspect of it that sounds like an animal grunting, and actually they have this conversation. It sounds like there's two animals having an argument, and
Right.
it starts off as almost like an animal growling, and then it just starts making these sounds that obviously sound like a type of chatter between the two of them. And there's even like whistling put in between the two of it, like, you know, kind of sounds like that. But
Right.
there's some interesting dynamics going on there. Like, it sounds like, again, like I said, like two Bigfoot, you know, yelling at each other, having an argument. Really interesting.
Right. And, yes, it is. And what I heard was two individuals that just sounded like they were talking to each other. It didn't last very long, but it's as if one individual made a statement and the other one replied. That's what I heard when I was staying at this cabin. If you ever have a chance to go to YouTube or attend a conference where Scott Nelson's doing a presentation, he enters these recordings into a computer program that slows the recording down, and it actually sounds like an individual speaking with a German accent in one section of the recordings. And it's where they in the Sierra sounds, you hear Ron Moorhead describing the scene where they had left some stew down at the bottom of the hill for the Bigfoot to come and get if they wanted to. And so the Bigfoot are chattering and talking back and forth, and it's really rapid fire. But when you listen to it on Scott Nelson's recordings, his analyzations, it slows down to where it actually says, "You be careful, Klaus. You may never go home." That's what it sounds like the individual says.
I'm going to have to hear that, find that. That sounds interesting. It's like,
Right.
would you like some more strudel?
Exactly.
Klaus.
Yes.
You know, I've heard many different types of Bigfoot sounds over the years, and you know, the most popular TV shows, they like Not Finding Bigfoot, as I call it.
Right.
Finding Bigfoot. No, it's Not Finding Bigfoot. That's what the show really needs to be called. Or even Mountain Monsters, or some of these other shows, when they look at it, you know, they're always the whoops, the howls, the whistles, the screams, that all could be from an animal, and very rarely do they really get into the chatter aspect of it. Now, I'm curious, when you went to this cabin and you had your experience, how old were you at that point in time?
I was in my 40s.
In your 40s.
Yes.
Okay.
What was your experience?
Okay. Well, I got permission to be at this hunting cabin, and it's during the summer. It was very hot. And when I arrived, I had an hour until it got dark. And so I decided that I wasn't going to turn on any lights, and I wasn't going to turn on the air conditioner. I just hurriedly unloaded my things out of the van, and I had a little gray schnauzer dog with me. And I got everything into the cabin, and I just stayed outside. And the only thing that I had ever seen on TV besides Bigfootville is I caught a little bit of Autumn Williams that she had a show back then, Mysterious Encounters, or I forget what it was called, but she used to make some whoop calls. She was imitating some Bigfoot whoop calls. Well, I had never heard a whoop call. I only heard her version. So I started doing that. And suddenly it was as if I was surrounded by giant owls. They were so loud that it just was incredible. And I thought, man, something could be sneaking up on me right now, and I wouldn't even be able to hear it because these owls are so loud. And I no sooner had that thought than a very powerful wood-on-wood knock came from the woods. And I mean, there's no way I could hit a tree hard enough to ever reproduce this sound. It sounded like a tree hitting a tree. And when that happened, all of the owls just stopped, and it was dead quiet. So I got my little gray schnauzer and I ran into the cabin. I shut the door and I locked it. And I sat in a corner chair and I just listened. And I hear these heavy footfalls coming up the gravel drive. This cabin had gravel all around it. And so I hear the footsteps, and then I hear the two individuals mumbling to each other, really deep, deep voices. And then there was a stick that was dragging in the gravel, and I thought, what are they going to do with that stick? And my heart started beating so hard that all I could hear was my own pulse in my ears, and I'm trying to calm myself down because I didn't want to miss anything. This was too incredible, and I was also thinking to myself, what are you doing here? And I just felt like I was way in over my head. But nothing happened other than that all night long. I could hear something outside the cabin every now and then, just kind of messing around, but that was it. And so when the sun came up, I ventured outside. I'm looking for footprints, but there weren't any because it's just a hard gravel. And I walked down the drive, and suddenly I hear not a loud wood knock like before, but I heard a wood knock, pow. And I looked up in the tree line, and up ahead of me, this tree line paralleled the road that leads to the cabin. And I see something black and moving in the woods really super fast along the tree line just inside. And it's coming down to where I am. And when it gets even with me, it stops. And then there was a snort, just like a gorilla snort. It wasn't a deer snort. It sounded just like a gorilla. And I realized, without any proof, I realized that I'm looking in the woods and I can't see the Bigfoot, but I know there's a Bigfoot in there looking at me. And that's how my first encounter went, where I was aware of what was going on.
Farlan, when
Yes.
you've done these hoop calls, right,
Right?
and attracted them to you, you may have been doing a female call.
Well, yeah, I always think of that.
And they all thought they were on for something that
Right.
night.
And I don't even feel like I attracted them to me. I feel like they were already there. It was as if they were waiting for me. That's
Yeah.
what it seemed like, because it didn't take any time at all. It just happened
Mhm.
super fast. And I actually left a part out. I had forgotten when I was waiting for something to happen, and before I made the whoop calls, I was hanging an apple on it was a piece of cord. I don't know why it was there, but it's like a clothesline. And
Yeah.
I put a slit in the apple, and I was hanging it on that cord. And while I was doing that, from the woods, a deep snort came at me, just like the gorilla snort that I heard the following morning. And it actually made me kind of shake a little bit. And I said out loud, "You're a big boy, aren't you?" But who knows if it was a boy or a girl.
Yeah. What was the dog's reaction, by the way?
Oh, the dog was just clueless. He didn't understand why I was wanting to hurry and get back in the cabin, and he didn't understand why we were sitting in there without the air conditioners. What I think.
So
He
the
wasn't-
dog.
He wasn't barking, but from
No.
inside when the he could hear obviously he could hear the noise
Right.
on the
No,
outside.
he just kept looking at me to see what my reaction was. He wasn't barking at all.
He was confused.
Probably so. Right, because
Yeah.
it was dark in there too.
Mm.
I was sweating like crazy. It was really hot in the cabin.
Mm.
The you listening to your story, I have to admit it's given me chills, and
Oh, awesome.
but in a good way.
Right.
Something in there that I recognize. Obviously they were there, waiting for you in a certain capacity. Now the owl hoots. Are you sure those were owls? Because
Well,
these things do like to mimic.
That's what I think. I think that it was the Bigfoot imitating the owls, because if those were owls, they sounded like they weighed 400 pounds.
Mhm.
That's how loud it was. It was so loud that I could not hear anything else. And since that time, I've visited this ranch several times since over the years. This was taking place in around 2004 or 2005. And so I've been back several times, and I've had all kinds of fun and crazy things happen with the Bigfoot there. And one time I had parked along that same road where the Bigfoot was in the tree line. And I just parked, and it was just at dusk, and I was listening, and nothing was happening. And I thought, come on, guys, do something fun for me. And I made a whoop call, and my response from in the woods right next to me, it sounded like a giant duck, just a whack whack, and yeah, and then from across the
wait a minute. So it was able to read your mind.
Right. Well, it makes me wonder, and from across the meadow, on the other side in those woods there, it sounded like 3 individuals answered that duck. So he goes whack whack, and the others go whack 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 all at the same time. So there's no ducks in the woods. They were just messing with me and having a good time.
That is hysterical. I don't know why, but I love that.
Can you imagine if a duck hunter was out there in those woods?
Oh, right. That's why I always giggle a little to myself when I hear someone say, if it quacks like a duck, and I'm like, not necessarily.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't know why I'm getting the biggest kick out of this. And, it shows an intelligence to these creatures. And, I know a lot of Bigfoot hunters, and almost all of them are the grounded, down-to-earth, that this is an undiscovered North American great ape. And I've never seen one. I can't say that I've ever really had an encounter that I can say positively was a Bigfoot. I've been in a couple of strange things in my lifetime. When I think back on, I can kind of go, but I have no proof or anything to say it was really a Bigfoot. Certainly I've never seen anything. Of course, I never see anything. But these other friends of mine who look for Bigfoot, they just think it's an undiscovered ape. And my whole reaction to that is, if it was really an undiscovered ape like a mountain gorilla or something, we would have found it by now, because if it was a regular animal.
Exactly. And yeah. That's why I regard them as a type of people. And I just feel like that's why you're not finding them, and that's why you're not going to find a dead carcass of a Bigfoot laying somewhere in the woods or alongside the road, because to me, they're people, so they're going to come and recover that individual, and they're going to bury that body, and they're going to bury it in a way where you're never going to stumble across that grave.
But even then, sometimes if an individual is out alone and dies, it's just like humans. Humans get lost in the wood and they die, and many times the bodies are recovered. So you would have to take into account that there's sometimes, whether it's an accident, you have a lone individual. But then again, how often do you walk through the woods and find other animal carcasses? I mean, nature is pretty good at getting rid of, things like that, because it all gets absorbed back into the system. You're not going to walk through, find bear skeletons or deer skeletons unless you come across a predator's nest, or a predator's lair.
Yeah, so then add to that, what you just said is absolutely true, and then add to that what I said is that I think they will try to find the individual's body, even if there is a loner or an individual that's been kicked out of the clan for whatever reason. The clan is still aware of where that individual is, and they probably keep tabs on that individual. And so if the individual isn't seen for a while, they probably go investigate. Now, it's just my theory. I'm really not trying to prove anything to anyone. I was at first. I was just like everyone else. I thought they were undiscovered apes. But it just seemed like from the very first encounter at the cabin that isn't what I was dealing with entirely. And so I'm to the point now where I want to try to help people not be so afraid when they have encounters. You mentioned the Finding Bigfoot show. I feel like all of those individuals on the show are kind of playing a part. I think that they actually know more than what they let on, and they're doing that show for the general public, and people that really are into research won't get that much out of this show. So I feel like they're just kind of holding back. I think they have more information than they're letting go of. But
I've heard that. Oh, in terms of a show, that's all they're doing is they're doing a show. I mean, I've had Cliff on my old show. I used to have another show, and Cliff Barrickman, I've had him on. Wonderful guy. I love Cliff a lot. And, like most people, and we've complained about this with people in the paranormal shows, is, you sign a contract, you appear on a show, and they tell you what to do. And
yeah,
a lot
pretty
of
much.
times it's scripted. They have their shtick. If you look at a Finding Bigfoot show, it's the same damn thing every week. They go to a place because they have reports. There's Renee spouting off her doubts. Well, I doubt this. Where's the scientific proof? When in real life, I hear she's seen Bigfoot. She knows they exist, but that's the part that she has to play for the show because she's the skeptic.
I've heard the same thing.
Yeah.
Man, I have a great idea for a show. I know that, and I can't prove this. I know that there are people out there that have a gift that can somehow communicate with a Bigfoot. I've experienced it through this individual that I know. And my idea for a show would be to take a gifted person like this and go to the places where you're invited. Let's say this people write in and say, yeah, I have a Bigfoot on my property and I'm scared or I'm worried or they're bothering my horses. And this gifted person goes with her entourage to establish communications with the Bigfoot and try to resolve any issues. It might be a simple kind of thing to do. And then to make the show even more interesting, if you could have celebrities that own land that have Bigfoot, you go and visit those locations as well. And I wish people could see how this actually works. The way I experienced it to prove to myself is I sent a thought out. I was visiting this friend that has this gift, and while I was at their house, I sent a thought out while I was checking my phone on the charger. I sent a thought out to the individual Bigfoot that we knew was nearby, and I said, you should have this person tell you all about the Falcon Project, because back then everyone was talking about this Falcon Project where they were going to have a drone with infrared camera and ambient sound, and it even could drop a dart and issue a tranquilizer dose or a tracking chip to the target. So I checked my phone on the charger and I went back to the backyard where we were all sitting, and everyone was talking around this little campfire we had going in the backyard. And when the conversation died down, the person with the gift looked at me and said, oh, by the way, Farlan, thanks a lot. So-and-so the Bigfoot's bugging the heck out of me right now to tell him all about the Falcon Project. So that is how it proved to me that this is real. This really happens. Now, me telling it right now to you, you have to take it with a grain of salt, and I understand that, but I'm to the point where I'm enjoying this for myself, and I'm trying to learn for myself, and if I can help get a message out on behalf of the Bigfoot to not be so afraid, because I think the message is actually this. I think the message is, please tell your people we are not monsters. Tell your people we are people. And that's not to say every Bigfoot is going to be like Harry and the Hendersons. I think there are places and times where you don't want to be because, not every individual is going to be the same. But as a whole, it seems the ones that we've encountered are all the same. They are living in clans. They're not tribal. They live in clans like the way the archaeologists described Neanderthals lived, just small family units making up a clan.
It's funny when you were talking about it, I already came up with the title of the show, Squatch Whisperer.
Oh, there you go. That's what it would be like.
Yeah, but see, here's the problem: is it's not the message giving to the people that they're not monsters. Unfortunately, we're the monsters. The human beings, are the monsters because we're the ones who want to kill the damn thing to prove it exists. We're the ones who run in fear at what we don't understand, and the first thing we do is shoot first and ask questions later. There's the historic tale back in 1933 in Ape Canyon, Oregon, and near Mount St. Helens, and they call it Ape Canyon because of what happened there. Are you familiar with the story?
Yes.
Just for our listeners to understand, it was in and you. Yeah, for Irene to understand, there was this group of miners in Oregon. They were out there mining. They had a little cabin, and they were out, and one day they saw one of these creatures. What did they do? They shot it. And they shot at it and hit it and wounded it, and the thing went off the cliff into this canyon. And that's where it got the name Ape Canyon. Well, shortly after that, that night, they were in the cabin, and all of a sudden they were attacked by several of these creatures, these individuals, that they barricaded themselves in the cabin, and these things were throwing rocks, banging on the door, trying to break in. They were pissed. And they fought these things off all night. They were shooting through the roof. They were shooting through the walls. The things kept coming at them. It was an all-night-long attack. Until finally the next morning, when everything calmed down, the miners got out of there and left, and they told their story. And some people had went back to the cabin later on, and sure enough, there was, rocks all over the place and holes in the roof where they were shooting through it. It seemed to corroborate their story.
Right.
And that, it's a famous historic tale, and but that is how we react. And even now, modern days, you might have a lighter fluff show like Finding Bigfoot, not Finding Bigfoot, and then now they have this abominable show, Killing Bigfoot. And
Yes.
I understand you actually were on an episode of that.
I was invited to participate to argue the point to not kill a Bigfoot. I'm not pro-kill whatsoever. I am anti-kill, and so I was involved in a debate. Actually, we had a debate with the show's GCBRO members, and then I was with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Samuel Webb Sintel. He's a neuropsychologist, and he's also an animal behaviorist specialist, and another gentleman by the name of Rick Cruz. And we had a debate around a table, and I understand that debate didn't make the editing when they aired it here in the United States.
It never does.
And maybe,
It ended up on the cutting floor.
right, and maybe it'll show up though on the website or something like that later on. And I thought that it would be great to watch. And so I got to argue from the side of not killing Bigfoot. I'm absolutely opposed to it. I don't think that you can justify it no matter what, because this isn't just an ape. I mean, these are a type of people. And, Neanderthals were our cousins. They were never our ancestors. They're our cousins. They were a type of people. They weren't exactly like us. And I don't believe the Bigfoot are exactly like us either, but very close. I mean, just how many other animals are there on the planet that stand upright when they walk and they have a foot shaped like ours and a hand shaped like ours? And that's not an ape. That's different. And there's even a movement.
Do you sorry, Farlan, do you think they've come from Neanderthals then?
No, I don't at all. I think that something else happened somewhere along the line. DNA will prove it. I really believe that Melba Ketchum's DNA research is actually, I think it's accurate, but instead of people accepting the results, they just want to attack the research publication and ignore the results. And then
they've done everything in their power to discredit her and make her look like a nutcase. Which, you know what, in all the other things that we look into, that's typical. If you come up with proof of something that goes against the grain of what we know of history, they're going to clamp down on it, dismiss you, ridicule you, or eliminate you to keep you from bringing that out into the public awareness, because that threatens the paradigm.
That is the way I see it, too. Why don't they take the samples and run them again in an independent lab and see if the samples match? But no one wants to do that.
Well, they've already dismissed it. They go, oh, no, it's contaminated. Or actually, the results didn't really say this. They just flat out lie. So they don't have to retest it, because if they retested it, you're giving it a bit of legitimacy by retesting it. No, they don't want to even go that far. They just want to make her look like a crackpot, make anybody else who looks into this look like a crackpot, and throw it out the window, ignore it, and get on with life so that we all stay good little consumers, buy our products, and keep the people in power. That's about it.
I've always said that, if you're, well, first of all, how many times does a sample have to come back as human before you realize it's human instead of saying it's contaminated? But if you claim it's contaminated, and you know that Jim Bob and Bobby Dale are the only persons that touched the sample because they collected it in the field, and Dr. So-and-so is the person that ran the samples, then match that contamination to one of these individuals. I mean, you are a DNA specialist. Prove the contamination theory. But it's not contaminated. It's human.
Yep.
Well, they do in crime, don't they?
Right.
Yeah, because crime doesn't threaten anything in society. But
yeah, so if they can do it in crime, they can do it in this.
I would think.
You would think, but they don't. You know,
Nope.
Again, it's a disinformation campaign. It's put out false information, belittle it. You know, that's like even on the mainstream news. Remember when we used to have Bruce on, you know, and he always called it the snicker factor. If they report on anything like this, it's always tongue-in-cheek, eyes winking, X-Files music playing in the background. You know, they belittle the news even as they're presenting it to you. You know, it's a type of brainwashing. It's a type of propaganda. You know, we'll tell you this little story, but, you know, we don't really believe it, neither should you. You know, that's
Right.
their whole attitude on it. You know, the Bigfoot themselves has been part of Native American lore for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And yet they won't take that seriously because, it's just a bunch of primitive savages. You know, it's their mythology. It's not real. You know, that's the attitude unfortunately, of Western culture. And the fact that these things are seen not just in America, North America, but literally all over the world. And I think the only place in America they haven't been seen is on Hawaii,
Right.
the Hawaiian Islands. But, you know, you have not only the Himalayan, you know, abominable snowman or Yeti, but you have, you know, the Vietnamese and Burma and South America and Africa and even Russia. Even Russia. They have the Almas.
Yeah, and Scotland, you got the what was he called?
The Willowus. And now in
here
Wales,
we've got the Tremar.
the Tremar. So, you know, so in the UK, there are Bigfoot sightings. What we would call Bigfoot. But, you know, they obviously have other terms for them. So these things are seen everywhere, and yet they're immediately dismissed. Why? Because, well, where's the body? Where's the proof? And eyewitness accounts don't matter a hill of beans to anybody. Bring in the body or shut up is basically the attitude of science. Even though, as Irene mentioned, in criminal investigations, what do they base most criminal investigations on? Eyewitness testimony. You know, there are people who are thrown in jail for life or have their entire lives ruined based on eyewitness testimony alone and no physical evidence or proof. Yet, that same eyewitness testimony, which is upheld in a court of law, is no good when it comes to these types of stories, that these experiences that people are having. Think about that for a moment. It's so easy to dismiss somebody else's story, especially when it's something fantastic and you don't want to believe it. Now, there is a...
but contamination, right, of DNA. If somebody's murdered or anything like that, and somebody else touches that body, they can get that DNA. They know, you know, and eliminate that person.
Well, you know, they are using DNA to exonerate people who were thrown in jail 20, 30, 40 years ago before the DNA evidence came along. But yet, still, and I say this because I have personal experience, I know people who've gone through this. I know people whose whole lives have been ruined by being labeled and convicted of something they didn't do based purely on hearsay. One witness testimony over the other with no proof whatsoever, and yet it's allowed in a court of law, and somebody's life is totally ruined, and they go to jail. And, you know, so that's the standard in our society. So take that and look at these other claims, and not just Bigfoots. You know, anybody who deals with ghosts, anybody who's seen UFOs, anybody who's had a time slip experience, if they're all blown off, they're laughed off. Why? Because, well, that's too fantastic. It can't happen. Well, it's real when it happens to you. And
exactly.
And here's, you know, from my perspective is I've had experiences in my life. I've not seen, but felt and heard. And I know these things happen. Can I tell you what they are? Not exactly. And that's why we do research to find out. What are these Bigfoot creatures? I've never seen one, never heard one. But I know people who have, very credible people, and I take their eyewitness testimony seriously. And, you know, Farlan, when you were telling your story earlier about being at the cabin, I got that chill of recognition that tells me that was legit. So,
well, thanks.
So, let's get off that tangent for a minute. Let's talk more about your experiences.
Okay.
When you went to this cabin, and Irene touched a little bit on it, do you feel like there was some type of psychic connection, like they knew who you were, or they were expecting you in some way?
At the time, no. But looking back, well, after all the things I've experienced since then, that's why I mentioned that. It seems like they were there waiting for me. But at the time, no, I'm not thinking anything like that. I was actually thinking just like everyone else, flesh and blood ape. I would have been in that camp. And so the things that I've experienced has really made me open my mind further. I just have to, I don't want to ignore what's happened to me. And then I also know that if I get on this show and I tell you everything that I've experienced, I probably will lose all credibility because some of it is so over the top fantastic. But I'll share one thing with you. This didn't happen at the cabin. This actually happened in eastern Oklahoma near Honubby. We were camped out on a hill, and it was dark, and we had a nice fire going. There was a chill in the air, and I stepped away from the camp for a second. I needed to go visit the woods. Mm-hmm. And while I was standing there, one of the guys that was in the group with us, he had hung some wind chimes in the woods just to see what would happen, if anything would happen. Well, the wind wasn't blowing, and one of these wind chimes that I couldn't see, I just hear it. It was pitch black dark. It just sounded like something was hitting this wind chime. It sounded like somebody had their hand and was just bumping the wind chime. Mm-hmm. So I go back to camp, and when I get back to camp, the fire is no longer there. The fire's gone, and everybody's in their tents asleep. And I thought, well, you bunch of sorry guys, why'd you do this to me? And so the next morning I jumped them out, like, man, why'd you guys put the fire out and get in your tents while I was gone? And they said, Farlan, you were gone a long time. We didn't put the fire out. It burned out. I can't explain that. I thought I was gone maybe 10 minutes.
And how long were you really gone?
You lost time then.
Right. I was gone long enough for a big, large fire to burn down to nothing. So, and it kind of disturbed me. Why didn't they come and check on me? But I guess they figured I'm a big boy. I can take care of myself, because I would go take a walk down the old logging road at night, and and I'd come back. So they weren't really too worried about me. But that was bizarre.
I think that's the first case of missing time that I've heard of in direct relation to a Bigfoot encounter. And
well, yeah,
that's very intriguing. And let me tell you something.
I don't think that's crazy at all.
No, I don't either. Because and we'll explain it to you like this, Farlan. If you're worried about saying things about your credibility, keep in mind that Bigfoot researchers people who look at Bigfoot researchers from outside of the field think we're all crazy anyway, who don't want to believe in this stuff. And then you have the two camps of Bigfoot researchers. And I liken them like I do the UFO community. You have the MUFON people who are nuts and bolts, pure science, craft, they're aliens from other planets, and that's it. And then you have the other types of phenomena, which delve so much into what we call high strangeness that it's hard to classify. And it starts to fall into things that we would think of as being interdimensional. When it comes to the Bigfoot creatures, and I say this even though I have not personally encountered it, in the years that we've been doing this show and talking with other people, and even Irene, your own experiences, as we've learned over the last year, these types of creatures, there is something about them that leads me to suspect that they're a type of interdimensional being, or a type of being that exists on this planet, which I think there's lots of different types of these beings, not just the big giant ones, but small ones.
Yeah, they exist as if they exist on this planet, but they have certain, well, I hate using that word, gifts. Mm-hmm. It's like animals. Animals have ESP, right? Dogs and things like that, they're very psychic. We have these abilities. Why can't this thing have why can't a Bigfoot have an ability like that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I'm convinced that they do.
And they've been here a lot longer than us, so they're more than likely more in that way. They're more far advanced than us.
And I am of that thing. Look, I think our society, I'm just going to flat out say it, our Western society, we think we're so advanced, and in my opinion, we've actually gone back in our evolution. We have de-evolved from where we used to be, because I don't accept the modern timeline of events. Cavemen to ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia, and then we go linearly from there. I think we used to be, and there's so much evidence out there that shows we used to be much more advanced and much more spiritually and psychically advanced. Till whatever the disaster that happened, whether it's the Great Flood or other disaster that pretty much almost wiped us out, and we had to start all over
back again.
Yeah, we had the reset button pushed, and we've spent this time in our evolution looking purely at things from a physical standpoint and ignoring hardly everything that had to do with the psychic abilities, which we all have, and the stranger aspects of our world. And then we overly simplify them by calling them a religion.
I always imagined when we were hunter-gatherers that we did have a much stronger psychic ability that we probably utilized. But there's no proof. I have no way of proving this, but any proof would be lost in time, because it would be handed down verbally. And I don't like to get biblical in any way, but what if the Tower of Babel was being constructed? If indeed it was being constructed, what if it was being constructed because everyone was communicating telepathically? Mm-hmm. And then suddenly, however it happened, that telepathic power was taken away, and now you're all speaking in your separate languages, but you can't communicate your ideas to one another anymore.
I look at the Tower of Babel story as a parable, not to be taken literally. I think it was a way of explaining how humans used to have this ability, and then we lost it.
There you go.
And now we can't communicate. I also look at the fact that when you say when we were hunter-gatherers, well, we were hunter-gatherers. We had people who are hunter-gatherers still today. We have hunter-gatherers, Native Americans, just 150 years ago.
Right.
But when you say that, people think, oh, you mean like 10,000 years ago in the ancient past. Look, I think 12,600 years ago, before the events happened, you had the oral stories handed down. What were those oral stories? Atlantis, Lemuria, advanced civilizations. You had the stories coming out of India. I can't even pronounce them right now, which talk about these great advanced civilizations with flying machines, weapons of war that match what we have today. So I look at it as, it's not linear. My personal opinion, it's not linear. I think we were a hell of a lot more advanced in the past, which is why when you look at, and I know I'm going on an off-topic tangent, but we thankfully got another hour, so I'll wrap this up real quick. The advanced Neolithic structures all around the world that are so advanced we could barely replicate them today, and yet they were done with ease. The older you go back, the better the technology was. Then the newer it gets, as we lost how the idea to do it, it got poorer and poorer construction. So I look at it the opposite. We as a species used to be more advanced. Now let's take a look at these other people, the Sasquatches. I do believe they exist. I believe that they do have some psychic abilities. And I also believe that they may have, and again, I hate saying other abilities. I think that they exist on a level on this planet that is a little bit beyond our comprehension, which you can call interdimensional. You can whatever you want to call it, whether they're phasing in and out of this reality. And they also have the abilities to cloak themselves, as Irene, you had experienced those 2 occasions.
Sorry, my Bigfoot's snoring away in the background. I hope nobody hears it.
Gertie's snoring again.
Yeah.
You were saying that what you were speaking about was off topic, but I don't think it is off topic because I think this is all connected. And I have a experience where there was something that thumped my forehead really hard. Now, you could argue that an insect flew into my head or whatever, but I was with my daughter. We had been fishing at a pond. It was still daylight, but it was going to be dark soon. And we're walking back to this same cabin that I've mentioned. And she's walking in front of me, and suddenly she stopped. And I nearly ran into her. And before I could even ask her why she stopped, I got thumped in the forehead. And I raised my fishing pole up, and I went, "Hey." And then I asked her, "Why did you stop?" And she said there were footfalls walking in front of her, like something big and heavy was walking and cutting in front of her, so she stopped, and then I got thumped in the forehead. So that was pretty bizarre, and like I said, it wasn't dark. There was plenty of light left. So what in the world was that all about? So I'd like to hear what Irene experienced.
Oh, mine's a long story.
Well, good.
It happened twice over a period of about 2 years. Here in Wales, I live in the remote area of Wales, in the countryside, in a small village. My house backs onto fields for miles, and I was letting my dogs out to do their last wee of the night one night, and it was late summer, I think. Yeah, it was about late summer. And they ran off down the bottom of the garden. I've got a terrific garden. So they ran right off down the bottom of the garden. And I'm standing on the patio waiting for them to come back. And coming towards me, I saw, it's hard to explain. I saw an outline of something stocky. But it was, this one was, I explained it to you, Mark. How did I explain it? It was like,
it was
Predator,
like looking at the Predator in the Predator movies.
Yeah.
It was like a shimmering outline that you could see through, but you could see that it looked like a big person or animal.
Yeah. This one was about, about 5 foot something. So anyway, I thought straight away, the first thing I thought, an alien. This is alien. I've never seen an alien, so it's got to be an alien. So I stuck my hand up in the air, because they're over here. If you put, I don't know whether you do it out there, but you put your palm up at something and you say, "Don't go there," sort of thing.
Okay.
All right? So right. I put my palm up towards this thing. It was about 4 foot away from me. I put my palm up towards it, and I said, I didn't say "don't go there" sort of thing. I says "F off." Okay. Right. I said "F off" in the words, the proper words. I said "F off," and I said it with, strength in my voice. This thing started to walk backwards. It didn't turn around. It started to take steps backwards, and when it got so far, it just disappeared. I didn't think any more of it after that. I told a few people about it, but I didn't think it didn't really worry me much after that, until 2 years later. Now, my house has got 2 back doors, right? One either end of the house. So the second time, I was letting the dogs out from the other back door down the other end of the house. Now, they have to run across the patio until they get into the beam of the security lights, and then the lights go on. Anyway, this they done, and then they ran off down the garden. And I'm standing there, having a cigarette, as you do, waiting for them to come back. And all of a sudden, this it happened again, but this time it was about 6'10", something like that. It was really, really big. And it started coming towards me, and it was about 2 foot away from me, and I wasn't frightened, and I didn't say anything. I never said anything, and I just stood there, right? And it was as if it communicated with me, but I don't know for the life of me what the communication was. But I know it did communicate with me. And it seemed like ages it was there. And then I realized the dogs were down the garden. Okay, so I started to get a bit worried, and I called to the dogs. They come running up the garden. No, wait a minute. I missed a bit. After the dogs ran down the garden for the first time and got out of the beam of the security lights, the lights went off. And just before I saw this thing again, a few seconds before I saw it again, the lights of the beam came on its own, and there was nothing that could have triggered the beam of the light. Anyway, so after a little while with this thing in front of me, I called to the dogs. The dogs came running up. They got as far as the patio. They stopped, and they just snarled and growled and would not come towards me. They would not come anywhere near me until this thing disappeared, until it went. As soon as it went, they come running across and straight through the door indoors.
Wow.
And that's the tram owl.
Yeah. That's what we call the Welsh, what we think is the Welsh Bigfoot. And the fact that every fall you hear the howls and screams coming from the local hills.
Terrible noises coming from the hills, yeah. Screams, terrible noises. Yeah. We've only got certain animals over here. We've got badgers, we've got foxes. I suppose if there's any mansion houses out there, they may have peacocks in the garden and things like that, but I don't think there's any that close to me here. And but these were not of those animals, not of any native animal that I know of.
Right. Well, my friend that researched Bigfoot with me bought a FLIR camera, and the other person that has the gift that can communicate with them was with us. And I know this sounds so crazy, and I understand why Bigfoot researchers that are just in the flesh and blood camp, they hate guys like me, because they feel like I am making everybody look like a crazy fool. But I'm just going to share with what I've experienced. I'm not trying to convince anyone. So my buddy has the FLIR camera. We're in a gravel parking lot in the woods where people come to do what the woods have to offer. There's an archery range and whatnot. So, whatnot. Now, there's an Okie term for you. Anyway, yeah. So,
we have whatnots here.
Yes. So
can I just interrupt?
Sure.
Just one thing I'd like to say. I think the one that I saw 2 years previous was the big one that I saw 2 years later.
Well, no, you thought it was a smaller one you saw 2 years. Yeah, it was small when you first saw it, and then 2 years later you saw it again, and it had grown.
Yeah, that's what I think.
That's awesome.
I think it's the same one.
That's awesome.
So anyway, continue, Farlan.
Oh, well, no problem. So my buddy's got the FLIR camera on, and so we're ready. A Bigfoot is supposed to come out of the tree line and step out into the open. We were going to see what it looks like on the FLIR camera if it's cloaked, and then the person with the gift was going to show them in their mind what the image looked like. So it was a trade-off of information. Well, what happens is it looks like two rabbits are hopping out of the woods. But we finally realized what we're seeing is it's the Bigfoot's feet where they're touching the ground. The heat signature is there. And we could see, this is at night, but still there's enough light. We could have seen if there was anyone there. We're not seeing anything with our naked eyes. FLIR camera showing where the feet are touching. Steps out onto the parking lot, and it's just there. And then the feet turn, and it goes back into the woods. And I said to my buddy, Rick, I was like, you got that, right? He said, what do you mean? I said, you hit record, didn't you? And he goes, oh, I didn't even think of it. I'm like, oh, my gosh. That was a missed opportunity.
I'll hit it when that happens.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. But I understand about the giggle factor that's built into this topic. I actually am guilty of doing that myself. In the mid '90s, I was with my family at a campground in Missouri, and the campground host came around at dusk and he said, "How's everyone doing? Blah blah, doing great." He said, "All right." And as he's leaving, he said, "Well, keep an eye out for Bigfoot." I said, "What?" He said, "Just keep an eye out for Bigfoot. People have been seeing him around here." And I said, "Oh, I think we'll be all right." And he said, "Well, I'm just letting you know." And he went on his way. And I turned to my wife and I said, "That guy's crazy. He told me to keep an eye out for Bigfoot." So I have to remember that when people are laughing and giggling at me, I remember how I was, and that way I don't get my feelings hurt.
What's funny is I know UFO ET abductees who used to be that way. They would laugh at other people who believed in it. And then not only did they have their own experiences, but then they realized in hindsight that they'd been having these experiences their entire life and weren't aware of it. So, yeah, it's human nature. We like to bully people. We like to make fun of other people, anything that's different. And, and it's so easy. We're taught. We are literally taught to make fun of people and make fun of things that we don't understand. Or if it's fringe, we're taught not to believe in this kind of stuff.
Right, and we're practically raised from birth to not believe in any of this. And I was a member for a while of MUFON, and I was up in northwestern Wisconsin, and I was on the deck of a cabin up there, and down the road and across the road, I noticed there was a blurry spot up at the top of a tree. It wasn't exactly over the treetop, it was to the side. So I got my binoculars out. I thought, well, I'll check this out up close, and I'm sure that'll go away. But when I checked it out up close with the binoculars, it didn't go away. I could see it really well. And it was exactly what Irene described as a predator pixels. And it was possibly a craft. It didn't look like an individual. It looked like a small craft was just off to the side of this treetop, just sitting there, and it was all pixels. And man, that really creeped me out. I quit looking at it and just wanted to quit thinking about it because I had to spend the night in this cabin. And I had actually seen a video of exactly what I saw in the binoculars. I had seen a video of where something exactly like that was just about 3 feet above the ground and moving in between the trees in the woods at this same spot. So, there are things out there that we don't understand yet.
Another type of encounter, and again, some people in the it's a great American ape Bigfoot, and again, I know several researchers that are like that, but yet I know the ones that have had really strange experiences too when they've been out in the woods. I have a friend of mine who's a Bigfoot researcher in Ohio. He's been looking for over 20 years because he had a personal sighting while deer hunting once. And they even featured him on the show, Finding Bigfoot. They did his episode and his story. And he had this sighting of this creature 40 feet away. So he's been looking at it ever since. But he's also had some really strange encounters out in the woods. And one time, he calls me up. He calls me up from the middle of the woods, absolutely freaking out. And he goes, "Mark, you're the paranormal guy. I don't deal with this stuff, but I'm going to tell you what happened." He was in the woods, Bigfoot hunting as usual. He's out there every single chance he gets. And he's in this one spot, and all of a sudden this ball of light comes out of the woods and floats right up to his face. And it hangs there in front of his face for about 30 seconds. And he was all freaked out. So I had to ask him some more questions. I go, "Well, how did you feel when this was happening?" And he goes, "Well, I was actually very calm. It was peaceful. There was nothing to it." And he just stared at it for about 30 seconds. And then he had the thought of grabbing his cell phone to take a picture of it. When he reached down for his cell phone, poof, it was gone. Winked out. And that's when he got scared. And that's when he picked up the phone and called me from the woods just seconds after this happened. There are a lot of stories that people see of lights in the woods. And they don't know what they are. They think that they're UFOs. They think that there's some natural form of gas or lightning, ball lightning. They think all sorts of these things. My personal opinion, I think just like Irene, in her way, I think he encountered one of these things. I think it came up to show itself to him, but in a non-threatening form. And I think there was an exchange of information. He just either didn't remember it or didn't tell it to me because he didn't know how to say it.
Or that information will show up later whenever it needs to. Like he may be in the woods again and realize he knows something that he didn't even realize he knows. He may have received a download.
Exactly.
That's what I keep saying about me. I received some sort of download that I can't remember. Mm-hmm. I just cannot remember. But when the time's right, it'll all come out.
Right.
But what I want to ask you, Farlan, when you were there and the wind chimes were playing or something was touching the wind chimes, how did you feel? You knew there was no wind blowing to do it.
Right. I just felt like, I was just actually going with my five senses, and I wasn't really having any other thoughts other than that. I thought there was a Bigfoot out there tapping on this wind chime with its hand, and I'd turn around and go back to camp, and I couldn't believe that they'd put the fire out, but they didn't. So that was all that I can say about that. I wasn't having any other emotions or thoughts or anything. It still is just bizarre to me that happened.
Did you feel strange in any way, like any kind of disassociation, or just seemed like something else was off when that happened? Did it seem perfectly normal?
No, not at all. And I actually have another episode of missing time where I was driving back from Oklahoma to Illinois when I used to live up there, and I was in the middle of Missouri, and at the time when this happened, I thought I fell asleep and I just thought I dozed off. But I realize now it was much different than that. I didn't just doze off and go, oh, that was close. I actually opened my eyes and I looked at the dash lights and I thought, what are those? And then I thought, oh, those are dash lights. And then all of a sudden it rushes into my head, oh my God, I'm driving a car. Now, I said, I'm driving a car. I didn't say I'm driving my car. So I grabbed the steering wheel and I checked my mirrors, and I'm on the road all by myself. I'm exactly in the lane where I'm supposed to be, but I'm only doing 35 because my foot isn't on the accelerator. So I went ahead and got up to speed, and I thought, man, I fell asleep, but I woke up. I didn't fall asleep. I woke up. And then I realized that I'm 3.5 hours behind schedule. I had to find a payphone, call my boss that morning and tell him, I'm going to be late for work because I'm 3.5 hours behind time, and I don't know where that 3.5 hours went.
Do you think that these beings, these people, as you call them, do you think that they are some sort of alien race? They reckon that there's all these different aliens that live on this actual planet. We've heard this, people say we've got aliens actually living on this planet. Do you think this is just another sort of race of alien people, maybe?
Well, I think that maybe, I think there's a connection. There's definitely a connection. What it is, I don't know. But but whatever that connection is might be exactly the same as our connection to any alien race. I believe that the Bigfoot know more than we know.
Yeah.
But I just think, okay, well, perhaps the Bigfoot are, maybe they were created by the aliens. Who knows? That's why I like to, watch Melba Ketchum's DNA project, and she might call something, let's say she gets some DNA and she goes, well, this is angel DNA. I don't know that she did that, but, substitute that word for something else and just say unknown, or, you don't have anything to match it to.
Well, it's not like they have an angel cadaver in the lab, to do a DNA comparison. But
right.
Actually, I know what you mean. It's like, it's semantics. They can say it's human, it's a specific animal, or it's unknown. That's all they can really say at this point.
Right, and then the Bigfoot's DNA, the maternal side is human, and the paternal side is unknown. There wasn't anything to match it to. Like there's not anything on the planet to match it to. So then that's where people start rolling their eyes. Oh, what are you saying? That it's from outer space? Well, maybe. Who knows? We need to keep looking at this instead of just trying to trash it.
Outer space, or more than likely, interdimensional. If we're dealing with a creature that has DNA that's not familiar. Look, DNA only goes as far as what you're able to categorize out in the environment. If you don't have moose DNA on file, how can you tell if it's from a moose? You might be able to tell maybe some kind of deer or a relative of a deer, but if you've never taken the DNA of a deer before, how are you going to of a moose before, how are you going to compare it? Same thing with a hominid, supposedly. This thing has DNA that seems like it's partially human. And then there's other aspects of it that are not. So what do you have to say about that? It's obviously, just because you can't classify it, first of all, it doesn't automatically means it's alien. It only means that we don't have that genetic marker on file. We don't know what it is.
There might be a hominin that it could match to. It's in the fossil record, but we haven't discovered the fossil yet, and we have no DNA for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we talk about things being interdimensional, and, that causes a lot of people to moan and roll their eyes. But paranormal will just be normal if we understand, the quantum physics behind it. I know that Ron Moorhead has a new book out, Quantum Bigfoot, and I haven't read the book yet, but I'm excited that this book is out there because this can explain a lot of the things that people are trying to describe in their Bigfoot encounters, the strange things, the cloaking, the interdimensional, all of these things might be understood with quantum physics. And, people just don't really think about these things. They're too busy living their lives unless you are a physicist. But parallel universes may exactly be how everything exists, and they talk about the butterfly effect. Well, if you have parallel universes stacked on top of each other, and you decide to test a nuclear bomb out in the desert in the 1940s, that explosion might actually do a lot of damage in the parallel universe next to this. I mean, there's just a lot of things to consider, and the more we understand, then the more we might be able to describe the Bigfoot encounters with this. But again, the flesh and blood people, they're going to lose their minds when you talk about these things. But if like you already said, if Bigfoot's just flesh and blood, why don't we know about them? And even when science does discover them, they're not going to be any easier to see. And science is going to have such a hard time trying to study them and trying to understand them, especially if indeed they do cloak and they do come and go as they please. Then science is going to have a hard time grasping that.
Well, you know what?
Yeah, but you see, sorry, Mark.
Go ahead.
What I can't understand is you've got the rainforest. They're always discovering new tribes in the rainforest and things like that, or new animals. Well, I can understand that in the rainforest, but a place like America, where there is so much technology, civilization, cities, one thing or another, and we can't get to the bottom of what this phenomenon of Bigfoot is.
But that's why science dismisses it. They laugh at it. That's where the snicker factor comes in. That's where the mainstream media and science, they don't want to hear it. They think we're all nutcases. And, I have little use for science these days because of the path that they have chosen to take, their own religious dogma, as I call it. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to look into the high strangeness that goes on in this world. I think it's earth-shattering enough that you have the mainstream pop culture physicists like Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson or Michio Kaku or any of these people who are the go-to people in all of the media to explain what's happening out in the universe. And, they're proponents of string theory, and even under string theory, they're beginning to admit that there are at least 11 dimensions that they know of so far, and that time, as we know it, is not linear. It's only our perception of it. So those two things right there are incredibly groundbreaking, but yet ask the average person on the street, they look at you like, what? What do you mean? Yeah, it's blown off. You might see it on a program on the Science Channel or something, or Ancient Aliens, and everybody just blows it off and gets on with their life. They go buy their cars and cell phones and tweet on Facebook and yell politics. We're conditioned to ignore it. And mainstream science themselves, even if they put it out there, nobody really knows it.
That's true.
And nobody wants to know it. We've been dumbed down.
Well, what would be the harm of updating the scientific method? I mean, since they devised how the scientific method works, we've invented a lot of technology, including computers. And let's go ahead and update the scientific method. At least let's bring it into the 21st century.
You don't buck the system.
Right.
Try going into the Catholic Church right now and tell them to change how they do things. Or
Sure.
Islam, or any of the religions. Modern science is a religion. And let me tell you something. We've talked to so many people over the years who they have their careers ruined in the scientific community if they try to look into stuff like this. If they try to look into the idea that there were past civilizations beyond what is accepted as the Sumerian is the first civilization 5,000 years ago. But yet there are sites around the planet, from Göbekli Tepe in Turkey to Pumapunka in Bolivia, that are going back 12,000 years. And the building techniques are so much more advanced than cavemen using copper tools. And yet they don't want to hear it. They absolutely don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear that there may have been other civilizations on this planet. They don't want to hear that maybe their whole dating system and radiocarbon dating might not be as accurate as they think it is. When you have footprints in petrified sandstone, that was once a riverbank, and like in Texas, and there's another one, I believe it was in Turkey, where there is a footprint of a three-toed, huge-ass dinosaur footprint stepping over a human footprint. Okay? It's there in the stone. It's right there. You can go to Texas right now, go to that riverbank, and there that thing is. And yet, you think that would be groundbreaking? Nope. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear it.
Right.
I struggle with the idea of giants, at least I have, giant people that once lived on this planet. And yet we're about to publish a book from a friend of ours, Jason Jarrell, who's done 8 years of research with his wife on the subject of giants here in America, North America. The Adena Mounds, skeletons that were found. He has hundreds of newspaper reports coming from such periodicals as the New York Times from 1880s or something, talking about how giant skeletons are found in these mounds measuring 8 feet tall. And where are all those skeletons? Well, the Smithsonian scooped them all up at the turn of the century and hid them away in their basement, and you never hear or see from them again. And now if you mention, hey, that there were giant people 8 feet tall here in North America, coexisting with the Native American Indian cultures at this time, you get laughed at by historians. You get laughed at by mainstream historians and archaeologists and anthropologists because they don't want to exist that this stuff was real. And there it is. That's the kind of crap that we have to put up with. And why, I turned away a lot from science and look more at common sense. What does the history tell you? What are people telling you? What are the native cultures saying about their encounters with these people? The woods walkers, as they call them. Lakota, Kuya Tatanka, Big Brother in the woods. And some have terrifying stories, and some have, they're just other people out there. We just don't, they do their thing, we do ours, we just leave them alone. And then there are the average people here now in the 21st century like yourself who are having these experiences. And some of them are fantastic experiences. So let me ask you this, Farlan. With the experiences that you've had, have you ever come face to face with one? I mean, you mentioned earlier seeing them in the woods or running along the ridge, or you see the black. Have you ever had a time where suddenly maybe one's standing a few yards away and you're looking at each other?
Only through my night vision. That's the clearest that I've seen an individual. I've not had a clear daylight sighting. Usually it's just where an individual pop its head up over a creek bank or peek around a tree real fast. They're just super fast. I've not had one just reveal itself to me, but looking through my night vision, there was one peeking out from behind a tree, and I had the old Generation 1 night vision, and the laser beam was hitting this Bigfoot in the face, and it had a stick in its hand, and it hit the tree that it was behind twice, and when it hit it the second time, the stick broke, and I realized that I needed to drop that beam down off of its face, and I actually apologized out loud. I'm sorry. Not to say that I think Bigfoot speak English, but this is just how I conduct myself. There's several reasons why I talk out loud. It kind of calms me down, and then I just feel like that the tone has a lot to say, even if the words aren't exactly understood. But if they are able to read your thoughts, then all of that combined should help you out. I think you have to have pure intentions when you're in the woods. If you're in there hoping that you're going to get a shot at a Bigfoot, I just don't think you're ever going to get that shot. Mm-hmm. There are people that have shot them. There in eastern Oklahoma at Honubby, I talked to a guy who was part of an expedition. He didn't tell me who he was with, and this was several years ago. But they shot a Bigfoot, and they're tracking the blood trail, and they came up to a scene where there were all these little balls that had been rolled up, made out of chewed up sticks and pine resin. And there was different stages. There was the sticks that needed to be chewed. There were some sticks that were already chewed up into a pulp. And then there was the balls that were made. And they think that they were taking those sticky balls. He said you could just touch your finger to the top of one and it would stick to your finger. You could raise it up.
They're stopping the bleeding.
Yeah, they were stopping the bleeding. They were plugging the holes with this. And come to find out, pine resin is a natural antiseptic. So it just totally made sense.
And again, they wonder why these things don't automatically approach us, because again, we're the monsters. We're the ones who,
right,
as a species, are the violent ones that have made them retreat into the woods. We could probably have an interaction or relationship.
We're the primitive ones, actually, Mark.
Yeah, we are. We are the primitive ones. Yeah.
Why tell me, Farlan, why do they tree knock?
I think that when they were tree knocking to me, I think the first time was to let the others know, hey, there's a person here.
It's a sort of communication then.
Right. And then I think it's to let me know that they are there. I'm sure that there might be people that have a lot more figured out about that than I do. And so I'm to the point now where when I go in the woods, I don't even do those tree knocks anymore, because I feel like it would be ridiculous for me to do that. In the beginning, it made sense because I'm thinking I'm attracting them. But I feel like now, if they're there, they are there. And if they're not, they're not. And they know it's me. It would almost, to me, I look at it like, what if you were to suddenly start mimicking my Okie accent? That I might take that the wrong way. I might think, well, you're being a little bit rude. And so for me to go into the woods and tree knock and do the whoops and everything, maybe that might be taken the wrong way.
Yeah, well, there might be a signal in those tree knocks. There might be like Morse code or something like that, and you could be insulting them.
Right.
You could be banging away at that tree and calling them a load of whatsits or something. You don't know, do you?
The tree mock could be their way of taking the piss out of each other. It's they knock and it's saying, "Hey, buddy, F you."
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
Well, you know, when they do the show Finding Bigfoot, what is the thing they always do? They go out there, imitate tree knocks, or then they're whooping, and they don't know what they're doing because they think, oh, if we do this, we'll get a response. And I think that, you know, if the Bigfoot's out there, they're listening and goes, oh, my God, these idiots are back.
Yeah, more than likely.
That's how I feel like they did, how they felt towards me. The location I kept going to, I went from feeling like I was a nuisance to them to feeling like I was being tolerated. I wouldn't say I never felt like I was totally accepted, but it got to the point where they quit messing with me. They just knew I was there and there was no more interaction. And I know people that argue, well, that's because they left. No, I knew they were still there, but they weren't. They just wanted me to leave. So I guess they felt like if they didn't interact with me, I would leave sooner.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you could have some type of relationship with these creatures? Whether it's like a mutual respect?
I have gifted them food before, and sometimes it's taken and sometimes it's not. So I just try to make sure the gesture is the main thing.
Yeah, but you can't really tell whether it's them that's taking it or whether it's a wild animal or anything, can you?
Well, it depends on how you leave it. And one of the things I was doing is I was taking a small jar of peanut butter, and I opened it up and I peeled the seal off. I tied a twine around it, and I threw it over a tall limb, and I suspended it from the ground really high. Not even a deer on its hind legs could reach this. And then I tied off to the tree trunk. And what would happen is it breaks the twine at the tree trunk. All of the peanut butter is eaten out of the jar to the point where the jar actually looks like it just came out of a dishwasher. So I think that they're just really licking that thing clean. Probably has a giant tongue. It
couldn't have been a squirrel or something, because squirrels are pretty good at things.
Or
like
I
that.
would even think even a bear, because bears would just like a bird feeder. They just rip it right down and then eat with everything out of it they can.
Right, but I had it suspended so high that the only way to get it was to actually break the twine at the tree trunk where I had it tied off. So if that got broken and the jar fell, well, yeah, you could say anything happened. Even ants could have cleaned it out. But I experimented with it. I started out, taking the top off and taking the seal off. Then I got to where I took the top off, left the seal on. And then I even got to where I just left the top and the seal. I didn't even open it. And it was getting opened on its own.
Yeah. Well, a squirrel can't do that.
Right. So I was trying to, I want to make sure. I don't want to jump to conclusions either. One time I had there was at the cabin, there was a pole that went straight up and then came out at a 90-degree angle, had a pulley and a hook. It's where the deer hunters and the hog hunters would hang their kills and clean them, gut them and clean them. And so I suspended on that hook a little net bag like apples and oranges come in, and I put a cheeseburger in that. Not in the bag, just a cheeseburger into this net bag, and had it hanging there. When I came back the next day, the bag was laying on the ground. It looked like the hamburger had just been eaten through the bag itself. The bag wasn't torn up. It was just soaked and twisted like you had dissolved the cheeseburger through it. And then the hook was taken off of the pulley, and the rope was stretched out as far as it would go laying on the ground. It was as if to say, I would like another, please. That's how I took it.
Thanks. You got any more?
Was it McDonald's?
No, it was just a greasy cheesy from a local restaurant.
Yeah, because McDonald's isn't real food anyway.
Yeah, but McDonald's is very addictive.
Yeah, but
but
there's so much additives in it, it's not real food, and it wouldn't surprise me if they don't eat it because of that. That's like aspartame, or Sweet and Low, that artificial sweetener. Ants won't touch it. It's sweet, but ants won't touch it because they know it's chemical crap.
Right.
So it could be the same situation. Now, I've had an opportunity to talk to some other types of researchers who had some of the more wild types of experiences. There's a gentleman out of Ontario, Canada, Mike Patterson. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Or
I have heard the name.
You've heard his name. He had a YouTube channel out, and for a few years, he supposedly had access to this property in Ontario, where they were developing a relationship with several of these Bigfoot creatures. He has a lot of audio recordings. Now, I know a lot of people have claimed he's a fake and that the audio recordings were all hoaxed and whatnot. And yet there's something about it where a lot of the stories that he tells and a lot of the experiences they have, there's just something about it that just makes me not dismiss it out of hand. Some of the audio recordings are kind of interesting, especially the fact that when these Bigfoot that he was talking with, they were learning English, and they would say some things in another language, and other times they would speak English. But the one thing that they would do is these things would speak and make vocal sounds, both breathing in and out. So they could, I can't even reproduce it, like talking like this when you're trying to breathe in and talking. Right. Our vocal cords don't really work that way. And yet these things were doing that. And the vocal range of these things, the deepness of the voice and whatnot. Again, I'm not ready to dismiss it out of hand as a hoax, but I'm also not ready to hang my hat on it and say, yeah, this is real. I wasn't there. We only have his word for it. But a lot of strange things that happen with it, especially like what you mentioned with these things being invisible. They had footprints appearing like right in front of them when nobody saw a creature, but yet, boom, footprints there where it wasn't a minute ago. Objects being like materializing, like marbles or whatever, pelting them, like jokingly. Handprints appearing on cars. And but one of the more intriguing ones was in photographs, these things seem to be able to manipulate the cameras and take pictures of themselves. But what would be interesting is you would even see the date and time stamp on the camera being like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and yet the picture is bright daylight out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So in situations like that, now people could say, well, yeah, that's a fake. You just set the camera time to a different time and, and that's a fake. Okay, yeah, fair enough. It can be faked like that. So it's not definitive proof. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that's the way these things, it work that way. So if it's in the middle of the night and pictures are showing up on the camera showing daylight, what is your conclusions to that? Is it something in a slightly different dimension or reality where it happens to be daylight? It's a possibility.
Right, it is. It is a possibility. I would like to mention that let's say that you're with an individual that has the gift. They can communicate with the Bigfoot. Anything that this gifted person hears, anything that goes in her ears, they hear it too. And so when you speak I'm speaking in English, they hear it in their language. If there's a word that they don't understand, the person that has the gift will have to translate somehow, whether they send the image, with their mind, send the image. If you're talking about a tree, they might send a picture of a tree, or even it might be an emotion. You send the emotion of sad or whatever the word was that wasn't understood. But how in the world is that working? I mean, it just blows my mind. I was sitting in a vehicle, and we were pulled over, and we knew that the Bigfoot were in the woods near us. And I unwrapped a piece of hard candy, and the Bigfoot hears that wrapper and asks her, what is that? And the person said, well, it's a piece of candy, and they didn't understand what candy was. And the person had to, explain to them it was something sweet that you eat. So that was eye-opening for me. I don't understand how in the world this works at all, but I would love to do an experiment, because I know that I can send out, but I'm not able to hear them. I would love to get my third eye opened or whatever it is you have to do to be able to hear them. I would love to have this gift, but I would love to do an experiment with a film crew. They could have the gifted individual at a location with a film crew and have me at another location, and the film crews themselves can decide what is it they want me to transmit, and I could send it out, and then that Bigfoot would send it to the other person, and the other person write it down. And if what I send matches what she receives, then there you have it. It doesn't prove that there are Bigfoot out there in the darkness, but it proves that there's a connection. I mean, that's amazing in itself.
Well, it could or couldn't, and I'm going to put my skeptical hat on, because
Right.
how do you really know that that person is communicating with them and isn't just telling you what you want to hear? And I'm just saying that only because, not accusing them of fakery, but, even though we deal with a lot of fantastic encounters, and, we're dealing with stuff that goes beyond reality sometimes, and it's beyond strange, but sometimes you still have to keep a certain level of skepticism. And unfortunately, I've dealt with too many hoaxers in my time that I can't just take anything at face value. So my question would be, if you're asking questions and this person is responding and giving you answers, how do you know they're legit?
Okay, well,
Sort of like you undone the wrapper of the sweet, that person sees you undone the wrapper of the sweet.
right. Well, I was skeptical too. When I first went out with this person to the woods, I took them to a location. They had no idea where I was taking them to. And so there wasn't any opportunity for them to set the stage. And so when we get there, the person with the gift says, well, there's a Bigfoot coming. And so I said, I would like to speak to it. And I asked it, would you do a wood knock for me? And the Bigfoot said, what's a wood knock? And I had to explain, when you hit a tree with a piece of wood. And the Bigfoot responded with, oh, I'll have to find a rock. And then silently it moved to another location because we didn't hear it moving. And then
sorry, Farlan, were you actually hearing this from the Bigfoot, or was this the other person saying
the
this?
other person saying it, but I wanted the wood knock to happen. And so the Bigfoot moved to a different location, just slightly away from where it was originally. And it said, I'll have to get a rock. And there was the sound, rock on wood, twice. Bam, bam. Now, no one was able to set that up ahead of time. And that was something that I asked to have happen. So that's what it took to prove to me that this person is on the level. And then the other thing that proved it to me was, like I said, I left the group in the backyard to check on my phone being charged. And I sent the message out. And then the Bigfoot sent the message to that person saying, hey, yeah, tell me, what is this Falcon project? So that proved to me that that's really happening.
So just understand that you, in your mind, did you use the term Falcon project?
I did. I said, okay, you need to have this person tell you all about the Falcon project. Those were my words in the thought that I sent out.
Now, did you in any way, shape, or form mention the term Falcon project to this person before?
No, and I didn't speak out loud. It was all a thought. I didn't say anything. And no, we hadn't been talking about the Falcon project at all in the backyard. This was just a thought that occurred to me when I went to check on the phone. I thought I could try to send this out and see what happens. And I didn't expect anything to happen. So when I sat back down in the backyard and everybody's still talking, I assumed that I'd already forgotten I did that. And then when the conversation died down, this person turns and looks at me and says, oh, by the way, thanks a lot. So-and-so's bugging the heck out of me to tell them all about the Falcon project. The emphasis was on all, because I had said all in my thought.
That's interesting.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, that was an eye-opener for me. It proves to me everything I needed. But again, I understand the listeners are going to be thinking, well, we're going to take this with a grain of salt or not believe it at all. And I understand that. But I'm just an average guy. Anybody that wants to investigate this can do it. And you don't have to get pack mules and go out into the far reaches of Oregon or Washington State. You can. It'd be awesome. But you don't have to do that. Anywhere that there's water and cover and deer, you have a really good chance of finding Bigfoot. And that may sound like a crazy blanket statement, but put it to the test. You'll have to go out there and try it. And you don't have to put yourself in danger. If you know of a place out in the country where you can just pull your vehicle over safely and out of the way and make a few little vocalizations and be patient, give them time to come and find you, they may let you know they're there and they may not. And they may, there may not be any in the area, but you have to put in a little bit of effort for yourself and see what happens.
Yeah, somebody needs to tell Matt Moneymaker that.
Oh, I bet he knows.
I don't know if his ego would let him.
I've never met Matt, so I have no idea what he's like.
Matt, yeah, I've never met Matt either, and to be fair, I just hear stuff. Like I said, I love Cliff Barrickman. He's a great guy. People say how great Renee is, even though she comes across as a skeptical biatch on the show. And Bobo is just a big kid. But, from what I hear, Matt Moneymaker is to Bigfoot like Zach Bagans is to ghost hunting. Just,
all right.
The type of egos that get in the way.
They had a paranormal subject on Finding Bigfoot one episode. They touched on the paranormal, but it's like they were too afraid to really go there. But I tried to read between the lines. I'm listening to Bobo, and I think Bobo has experienced a lot of things that he's just not going to talk about.
Not on that show, anyway.
Right, not on that show, exactly.
Well, that's why
that show's for the general public, and it's really doing a service in a way. A lot of people watch the show and get interested in the Bigfoot topic, and I think that's good.
It's like when the Ghost Hunters came out several years back, the first ghost show, and you got to give them credit. They put paranormal research into the mainstream. Even though the show is crap, they've been caught faking things, and it's boring as whale shit. It served a purpose, just like Finding Bigfoot does. And whether that show continues, I hear that they're never sure if it's going to go from season to season. So who knows? My personal favorite, I've said this before, it's my insane guilty pleasure, even though it is such baloney, is Mountain Monsters. Love Mountain Monsters. I don't know.
Very entertaining.
It's insanely entertaining, but it's also insanely scripted. And, it's one of those shows that I watch, especially in the last couple of seasons when they've really gotten into this heavy-duty paranormal stuff. And there's that part of me that wants it to be true. It's like, God almighty, I really wish this was true so I could go and talk to him about this other stuff. But, I know better, having dealt with a lot of these TV shows. And I don't blame the guys who are on the show. It's like every other group, even Ghost Hunters. I don't exactly blame them because when these people sign these contracts to get on these shows, they sign their lives away. Next thing, and they're told what to do and say, or else they'll get sued into oblivion.
Oh, exactly.
So
well,
go ahead.
Well, for what it's worth, I would just like to say, love it or hate it, the title is terrible, Killing Bigfoot, but the actions that the GCBRO is doing to me is horrible. They are out there trying to kill one. But I did get to be out in the field with the show, and what I saw was that these guys really are hitting the field, and they're not scripted. They're not, the director, Peter von Puttkammer, he's not telling them what to do at all. He's just filming whatever it is they're doing. And so these guys are really going out there doing what they say they're doing. And I know one of the guys, the leader of the group, he's complained about his dogs getting killed. The Bigfoot are always killing his dogs. Well, I got news for him. They always will kill his dogs. If he loves dogs, he should never, ever own another dog again, because they are going to come and kill his dog.
Well, because he's sending his dogs out to kill the Bigfoot or to find the Bigfoot to kill him. It's self-preservation.
Well, yeah. They're coming to his property and killing his dogs. And that's what they're always going to do.
But you know what? Bigfoot in general don't normally kill dogs unless they're being attacked.
Well, right.
And most dogs run from him. Yeah, most dogs. But that's probably the thing, is he has it in his head that that's his mission in life, is to kill a Bigfoot. Well, if you know that you have somebody out there that wants to kill you, how are you going to react to that person? when there's no reasoning, when there's no, I would like for him and anybody of that mentality to suddenly come face to face with one out in the wild, and they don't have a rifle, or they don't have anything to harm them, and then see what happens, and then have them come away from that experience to say whether or not they really want to kill one. Let's face it, most of these people who want to kill a Bigfoot have never really seen one. They just want to kill it to prove it exists. That way, then we can have conservation. Yeah, we'll conserve it by killing them first. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I struggle with that a lot. I just can't accept it.
Now, for how long now? Now, you've been investigating Bigfoot and having these experiences for what now? About 17 years?
Since around 2004.
Since 2004, so 13 years now.
Yeah,
Okay.
13 years, yeah.
Okay. When was your last encounter?
Well, last summer I was on the ranch again, and I know that we had some come up to us in the tree line. We could hear the movement, and I mean, you just have to know they moved in to where they surrounded us. So I just know that it was the Bigfoot. There's no way for me to prove this to anyone. Anyone could argue, well, how do you know you weren't hearing wild hogs or deer? Well, usually deer and wild hogs don't try to move in strategically to surround you on 3 points to keep an eye on you. That's the main thing there. The other thing that happens is right here by my home. I'm always finding in two spots only, stick signs that are on the ground. And even my wife is so skeptical about this. She was out there one day saying, look, I'm going to throw these sticks up in the air. They're going to land and make a pattern. Well, I know sticks fall and break and they can land and make patterns, but this is only happening in two spots on my property. And what I'm finding is triangles and 90-degree angles and T's. And for a stick to meet exactly at these points to form a triangle, I find that a little amazing. And it keeps happening in this one spot in the front and another spot in the back. And what they mean, I have no idea. I like to think that they are a blessing, but I have no idea. And other people are talking about stick signs, and sometimes the signs are actually standing, like an X might be standing, leaning up against a tree, or the sticks are supporting themselves in a crook of a tree. But what I'm finding are laying on the ground.
Have you ever been in a position where you feel like you're in danger?
Only once, and that's when I first went out with Tim Harjo, who was in Bigfootville. I just called him up. I looked up his number in the phone book and called him, and he agreed to meet me here in Oklahoma, and we went out to a spot that I had permission to go to. I had no idea what he was going to do, and I didn't know anything about Bigfoot. And Tim made some grunts, and he stomped the ground a little bit, and the next thing I know, I'm hearing these cannonball-sized rocks hitting the ground out in front of us in the darkness with a thud, like thud, bump, bump, bouncing. And I said, what is that? He said, those are big rocks. I'm like, oh my God, what are we doing? I thought we came here to make friends. I didn't know we were here to challenge Bigfoot. And then back behind us where the creek bank was, I hear the Bigfoot are sliding down and running around, and they're all around us. And Tim looks at me and says, we need to get out of here. And I thought, what in the world are we doing? But Tim knew what he was doing. And
he was antagonizing them.
Yeah, he was. And that's not what I want to do. That's the only time I ever felt threatened. And so that's not how I want to do, and I don't do that anymore like that. I just go out, and if they want to let me know they're there, great. And if they don't, we got teased a lot because we mentioned playing cedar flutes. We don't play the cedar flutes because we think we're going to charm the Bigfoot or that they're going to appreciate the music. It's just, it makes us different than anyone else in the woods. Mm-hmm. And then instead of you hearing a bolt action rifle clicking, you're hearing a flute play. And it just sounds so neat to be out in the woods and hear this this flute playing a Native American song, and it just has an effect. I think it has an effect on everything in the woods, and it seems that some Bigfoot may want to sit and listen, and others just don't have time for it. They got things to do. They need to keep making their rounds.
Farlan. Oh, Farlan.
Yes.
It's okay. I forgot where I was then. The smell. Is it true that they have this smell, this nasty smell with them? Have you ever smelled that?
Oh, I sure have. And it just depends on the weather, the season, and what they've been doing.
And if they had their Saturday night bath.
Right. And I believe that the Bigfoot actually try to keep clean. I've even smelled honeysuckle smells where I believe the females are taking honeysuckle vines and rubbing those all over them like a perfume. But I've smelled the roadkill, wet dog, wet horse, just a garbage truck odor. Just depends on what they've been doing and what the weather's like.
Yeah, so if it's been raining, you'd get the pongy wet dog smell.
Right, and one time we were camped out near Honubby. I keep mentioning Honubby. We were camped out near Honubby, and we had a fire going, and it's summertime, so the fire is far away from us. We're just having it for light. We don't want to be sitting near it. It's too hot. And 2 owls show up in the treetops, and we're underneath these giant, they were either sycamore trees or cottonwood trees. And the owls are up in the top of this tree, and the fire's illuminating them, and they're doing their owl sounds, hooting back and forth, and then suddenly they stop. And I turned and looked at the guy that was with me, and I said, "We're about to hear a wood knock." He says, "How do you know?" I said, "I don't understand how I know." And then, bam, there was the wood knock. And he looks at me, and then we hear footfalls it's running. Bipedal, boom, 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 boom. And he said, "What was that?" And I said, "I think a Bigfoot just ran and jumped across that creek." And that was an amazing night. And he had to stay there. He had a tent. I had a cabin down the road, so he really didn't want me to leave, but I left him there. And he said that after he got into his tent, that he heard the Bigfoot walk up to the tent and then step over the corner of his tent like one foot's planted, and he swung the other foot around just to purposely step over the corner of the tent like that. Another time when we were camped out, we thought that the other guys were getting in and out of their tent, zipping their zipper up and down. They thought we were doing it. I think that the Bigfoot were imitating the sound of the zipper, and they were messing with us, messing with all of us.
In regards to the smell, here's something that people don't consider or understand. Have you ever smelled a homeless person?
Yeah.
Holy crap, are they rank. And when I was living in Jersey, where I was living in the northwestern part of the state, was right near a spot in the Appalachian Trail. And occasionally I'd be in the market, and in come these obvious hikers, by the way they're dressed. They've been out walking the Appalachian Trail, and they may have been out for a few days. And they could be halfway down the aisle, and the stench hits me that they haven't bathed in quite a few days. And they've been working and hiking, working up a sweat and all that bacteria and body odor. I'm sorry, human beings reek when they are not clean. And if you get an animal who is human-like, if they have any kind of body chemistry similar to what we have, it's a quite possibility their throat gets very musky. And I think that could be a combination of what we smell half the time when these people smell these things. I mean, if you haven't taken a bath in a week, see how well you smell.
Right, and a lot of times people report a skunk odor, which I have smelled. In fact, one of the times that 2 other guys and myself were coming out of this trail at night, we're coming out of the woods on a trail, I had a little red light on my forehead, and I'm using that to guide my way. I start smelling a skunk odor, and I come around the corner of the trail, and up ahead, the red light is illuminating a couple of sets of eyes on the ground. And I thought, oh no, there's 2 skunks up ahead. We got to be careful. But then I realized that the eyes that I thought were two separate skunks were actually moving in unison. And I finally realized that was a Bigfoot laying on its stomach, and it's raising its head up just enough to see me, and I'm seeing the eye shine reflect the light, and then the Bigfoot would look back down. And so I'm trying to get the guys to realize, there's a Bigfoot laying up there, and they never could see it. They couldn't see the eye shine. They should have tried to get right behind me and look over my shoulder. I think that would have worked. But then the Bigfoot decided to leave, and when it pushed itself backwards and stood up and spun around and ran away, they heard that. They heard the heavy footfalls running. So they knew I wasn't pulling their leg then. And in that same area, I was trying to prove to a guy that contacted me that the Bigfoot were there. It was actually my buddy Rick. He thought he was going to punk me out. He didn't know me. And I agreed to take him out there. And I don't do that anymore. I'm not going to I don't want to tell people where the Bigfoot are now, but it worked out okay in this case because he's on the same page I am. But I took him out there, and he says, well, I want something to happen. And I said, well, they're here. And he says, how do you know? I said, I don't know how to explain this to you, but you feel it. You feel them come up. You feel this presence come up. And he says, well, I want something to happen. I said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to continue down this trail as if we're going to keep going. They have already positioned themselves to follow us, to watch us as we go, but we're going to spin around and go back exactly like we came in and back to our vehicles. They know we're going to head back to our vehicles. But if we turn around and go back, you're going to listen and you're going to hear them running because now they have to reposition themselves. So we started walking like we were going to keep going. And then when I said now, we turned around and just exactly like I said, those heavy footfalls, boom, 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 boom. And he could hear that. And he said, you got to be kidding me. And that's how he knew that I wasn't pulling his leg. And over time, I got to convince him that they were there. And now he's a great researcher. He's the guy that's in this Killing Bigfoot episode that I'm in. And he even came to Honubby. Is it okay for me to plug the Honubby conference?
Yeah, actually, unfortunately, we
were going to tell you to do that.
Yeah, we've run out of time though too, so we are at the end. So
okay,
why don't you go ahead and tell everybody? Go ahead and plug the conference, how people can find out about that, and how can people also find you? Do you have a website or how they can connect with you if anybody has any questions?
Well, sure. If anyone ever wants to contact me, I'm on Facebook, and I'd be glad to talk to anybody anytime about Bigfoot. I just try to share what little information I have, and I love to gain information from other people. I love to hear about other people's encounters. And I am involved with organizing the Honubby Bigfoot Conference, which is a part of the Bigfoot Festival in Honubby. And this year, we're actually going to have Dr. Jeff Meldrum and Dr. Samuel Webb Centel, M.K. Davis, and Adam Davies will give presentations at the conference. And that's October 7th and 8th. And the website for that is honubbybigfoot.com. And there's a place to contact those of us that are helping organize. You can contact, ask questions. We also have a Facebook page, and we'd be glad to answer questions, give directions, any way that we can help. We'd be glad to have you come and visit us.
Well, Farlan,
sorry, how do you spell Honubby?
It is actually spelled like it's Honobia, but it's Honobia, but it's pronounced Honubby.
There you go, folks.
Well, Farlan, thank you so much for coming on the program. This has really been a great conversation. I know we could have done another hour easily, so go ahead.
Easily. I really appreciate you having me.
Well, we'll have to have you back on sometime.
Please do.
Yeah, come back on.
I would be
Definitely
delighted.
come back on, because I want to learn more about Bigfoot, especially after my experiences.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, everybody, thank you for listening to another edition of Paranormal UK Radio.
UK Radio.
On the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Shut up. And we'll catch you all next week. Have a great evening, everybody.
Okay, bye, everyone. Bye.